Well, good morning again, everyone, and happy Easter. We are a week into the season of Easter as a joyful time in the life of the church, and we're going to be talking about some of the stories, as we just did a moment ago, and as Amanda shared with the kids. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at some of the stories that follow the resurrection, and particularly we're going to be looking at what the disciples do with this information that they have now been given. That Jesus has been raised, things are different now, things will change and never be the same going forward. We talked about that some last Sunday on Easter. And we'll be doing this short 3-week series now about the road home. And what that means or what that looks like, I guess is open to interpretation. But all of these stories, to me, over the next few weeks will involve a road home for you, or probably speak to some of our experiences or even shared experiences. One of the experiences that I'm guessing that many of you do not share with me, although a couple of you do, is to know what it's like to be introduced to somebody for the first time and them finding out that you are a pastor. That is a different kind of experience for a lot of people. For example, I wouldn't say that it has really lit up a lot of dinner parties when I have been invited and we're making small talk and people find out what I do for a living. Sometimes people get really excited, and those are the people that I'm most nervous about. And then there's sometimes that people say, oh, well, that's nice. I'm going to go refresh my drink. And then there are situations like when my daughter Greta has brought a boyfriend to the house, like you, John, and they find out that Greta's dad is a pastor, and I'm sure that just is like a whole nother layer of whatever it is that they're feeling as they're coming to the door. And then there's airplanes. Airplanes are always exciting. You get sat down next to the chatty person, you know, the one who just wants to occupy all that time on the tarmac with a conversation, and then they find out what you do for a living. And it's interesting, because you usually get the same two responses. You get, wow, I want to tell you all about my Christian faith, and they're excited to tell you about it. Or it's, well, I've been real busy and I haven't been to church a lot, and like, I'm not your pastor. It's okay. I mean, I could be. We could talk about this, but most of the time it's, oh, okay, well, have a good trip, and then they put their headphones on, and so I was reading an article recently from a pastor and a writer. His name is Sean Gladding, and he was talking about this experience, and apparently it's a universal experience for us clergy when we get on airplanes, that we find this thing out. And he says that one of the comments that he often gets when he's talking to a stranger, particularly someone seated next to him in the next seat, is that they'll say, oh, okay, well, that's nice. Well, I don't believe in God, but good for you. And his response to that is usually, could you tell me a little bit about this God that you don't believe in? Because chances are, I don't believe in that God either. Because the common experience, or the experience that is so often the case, is that somebody comes at their understanding of Christianity or their understanding of God, and it is through some preconceived ideas about what that means, or who you are as a believer or as a pastor, and all kinds of sometimes baggage that goes along with that, or just things that they have pieced together from bits of things that they have seen or read about or heard or experienced. But it doesn't always paint a clear or even accurate picture of what this faith that we celebrate is all about. And it certainly doesn't oftentimes look like the kind of faith that we talk about on Easter. So today we're going to be looking at this story a bit about Thomas. And I'm going to come back to that theme in a second. So Thomas's story is a great story. It follows almost every Sunday. If you follow any kind of traditional reading of the scriptures and in the church year, this story of Thomas comes the Sunday after Easter, or maybe the Sunday after that. It's the story that we know about, referred to as Thomas, where he gets his nickname as Doubting Thomas. Lots of paintings to depict this, lots of stories come out of this. Many, many, many a sermon preached on this particular passage of Scripture. And what I want to point out is that while Thomas is interested in touching Jesus, I want to see if part of Thomas's story touches you and I today. I want to know if part of his story touches us. So just to recap, Thomas is one of the 12 disciples. He has been with Jesus through thick and through thin over the last 3 years. They have been ups and downs. And recently, of course, the crucifixion happened on Friday. It was earth-shattering. It was devastating. He could hardly bring himself to wrap his brain around what has happened. And the story picks up where we know that the word got out, whether it was some of the other disciples, whether it was some of the women, but the word gets out. And there's this message about Jesus and that he has been raised from the dead. And this is all very perplexing. Perhaps to some it's exciting, for others it's confusing, others are just flat out suspicious, and who could blame them? So the disciples, the remnant of them, they're gathered in this room. Maybe tradition holds that it's the upper room, the place where they met for the Last Supper and where the foot washing took place. That's sort of their headquarters, their base camp while they're in the city of Jerusalem. And so they're gathered there, and the doors are locked because they think if they will crucify this man who is our leader, then those who have been his followers, those who have been his disciples, his students, well, maybe they're going to turn their ugly attention toward us, and we're going to be guilty by association, and they're coming after us. So while it says in the text that they lock themselves in this room for fear of the Jews, don't read any sort of ugly anti-Semitic stuff into that. It's talking about the Jewish authorities and the people who have sort of put a bullseye on Jesus, and now the disciples are worried that that bullseye is now on them. And so they're in this room, and they're locking themselves in there, and they're hunkering down, waiting for the worst of this storm season to pass. And Jesus appears among them. It says the door is locked, so clearly John is trying to convince us that this is a supernatural event, aside from the fact that you have to already understand that the resurrection has taken place. He goes in there and he says, "Peace be with you," and he shows them his wounds. It's me. It's not my look-alike. It's not somebody you haven't met before. It's me. And he offers them peace, and then he leaves, and then Thomas rolls in. Now, if I'm Thomas, it's been hard, right? And he finally brings himself to go meet with the disciples again. Here's the thing that this writer was asking that I hadn't really considered. Where's Thomas been? I mean, he left, or maybe abandoned, the other disciples on Good Friday. Did they sort of come to an agreement like it's every man for himself now? Was the thinking, I guess this is it? Like the thing that we had been working for, following Jesus, pursuing what this meant to be called by him and faithfully following our rabbi. Is this over now? Do we just go back to where we came from? Do we go back to our old trades? Do we go back and check in with our family? Do we move back in with mom and dad? I mean, what were they supposed to do in that moment? And maybe it was for fear of what happened if they were seen in public, or maybe it was just shell shock, or maybe it was the idea of, as we are grieving, it is better to do this together, and so let's band together. But as is the case when any time that somebody is going through a difficult moment, a traumatic moment, there's always going to be that individual or that group that says, I want to just do this on my own. I am not fit for public consumption right now. I need to go back into my place. I need to be left to my own, and I will rejoin community. when I'm ready. But allow me to grieve my own way in the way that I need to right now. And maybe that was Thomas's approach. But he disappears. He's gone for like a week. And then something within him says, I want to go back. I want to rejoin my brothers. I want to go see what this is about. And he gets back, and he is probably just beginning to come to terms with what has happened. And maybe I'm guessing he's deeply disappointed. I mean, 3 years isn't a lifetime, but 3 years is long enough, especially when you have given up everything to follow somebody and you have believed in the ideals and you have fully supported this thing and you are a part of the movement and you are a part of, Thomas wanted to be a part of the Jesus revolution. He signed up for that. There was no going back for that, and so he committed to that. And then he is now grieving in a personal, emotional way the death of Jesus, but he is also grieving what didn't come to pass, which he hoped would, which he believed with all of his heart would be the thing. And he comes back into that moment, and now he comes into the room, and then the disciples are like, yeah, you just missed him. If I'm Thomas, I'm furious. 90% furious that these brothers are trying to do this to me. Like, is this punishment for leaving your side? Well, you banded down here together and you're fearful for your lives that I abandoned the company? Like, is that you're doing this to me? Is this a sick joke? How dare you toy with me like this, right? And then there's the 10% that they actually said something that he believes. And then he's mad at Jesus. What do you mean? What, how? Where? Why? Why them and not me? Why then and not now? He's upset about this, right? And so he's hurt by this. And it's got to be sort of a fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me with Jesus, right? Okay, I followed you once. And now they're going to say that you showed your face and I wasn't there. And he's upset about that. And I'm sure that he feels, in a way, betrayed or hurt by this. And it doesn't come out in the text, and this isn't necessarily written so that we can understand the psychological and emotional inner workings of Thomas, but there is something about what he experiences that has got to resonate with so many of us. Particularly those who have felt deeply hurt by the institution that they were told that they could trust and that they could believe in. When Sean Gladding says, tell me about that God you don't believe in, because odds are I don't believe in that God either, I think he's addressing the skepticism, the hurt, the suffering, the struggle that so many people have felt, whether they were insiders and Christians to begin with, or whether they were on the outside and looking in and saw the church as judgmental and hypocritical and just downright ugly. And so there's a part of Thomas's story that I think speaks to or touches many of you, because I know that is a part of so many of your stories. And I mention this every few months, but I know that one of the key pieces of what makes up so much of the DNA of this particular congregation is that we have occupied that beautiful resurrection space of being a church where a lot of people who have experienced hurt, and in many cases hurt by the church, have found a place where they feel safety and belonging again. And so rather than coming down critically on Thomas for being doubting and skeptic, or I would add, if we really had to look at him, anger, we'd see some sympathy. And imagine being in Thomas's situation. How are you going to perceive that situation? What emotions are going to come flowing out of you in that moment? And so he says to the disciples, instead of saying, you are my brothers, we've been through hell together, I believe you, he says, no, I am not going to be fooled again. unless he stands before me and I see the wounds and I can touch him with my own hand, I am not going to be back on board. And I don't fault him for feeling that way. And a little bit of time passes. And Thomas, again, whether it's the Spirit guiding him, whether it's him mustering the courage, whether he just can't bear being apart from the sense of community and family that he has with the disciples and with the other early Jesus followers. But something compels him to go back in again, knowing that he is taking a risk by setting his foot in that room one more time, but he just feels like he can't bear to not take that risk. And he goes in there. And Jesus stands before him. And anticipating his concern and anticipating his doubt and anticipating his anger, Jesus says, Thomas, it's me. Go ahead. Touch my hands. Feel my side if you wish. But it's me. And the thing that John doesn't spell out in this story that I think is so urgent for the church to hear and so critical for each one of us to remember is that the way that Jesus receives Thomas. He doesn't say, I heard you didn't believe last time you met with the disciples. He doesn't say, yeah, they reported to me about how you had to touch my hands before you could believe. Hey, I bet you're angry. Why don't you dial it back? He just simply receives him and meets him where he's at. And he welcomes him with open arms, doubts and skepticism, hurt and all. He says, all I really want, Thomas, is you. And what we see is a story of the prodigal son, once told by Jesus as a parable, now coming back in real life in the form of one of his disciples. I wonder if it dawned on any of the other disciples in the room that day that they were seeing come into reality a story that was told as an example that Jesus offered when he was talking about what God's love and the kingdom was like. And here Jesus has an opportunity to actually model it for Thomas. There's a group of people in Christianity that are disparagingly, jokingly, but disparagingly called the Creasters. You know the Creasters. Sometimes called the CEOs, the Christmas and Easter onlys, the people that come twice a year, that fill out all the extra seats, that come in and they worship and they celebrate Jesus' birth and Jesus' resurrection and not a lot in between. And we look at our attendance numbers from last year and how many extra chairs do we need to put out and how many Creasters will there be this year. And I don't think anybody is angry at those folks. But I do think that you people that come 25, 35, 45 times or more a year, along with me, have judged them. And what if their story is more like Thomas's? Sure, I think that there's some people that don't make church a priority. I don't think they pay a lot of attention to their spiritual life. I don't think they think a lot about their health and their importance and their involvement in their community. But I also think when Thomas showed up, Jesus didn't say, hey, it's nice of you to show up today. Are you here for the donuts? We took your name tag down. Jesus meets them where they are and embraces them. And he's just glad they're there. Because he knows what we don't, which is, what is their backstory? What is their reason? What could be offered up as an explanation for why? And maybe unlike Thomas, they have not felt that pull back into community that we all know is so important, but has been missing for them. And so as I was reading through Thomas's story, it occurred to me about how many times have I thought, oh, well, yeah, good, Creasters come, boost Easter attendance. But they're people, and they're children of God, and they deserve to be welcomed with the same kind of love, openness, and respect, and met where they are and welcomed and celebrated for their presence, because they were here that day as well to celebrate the risen Savior. This is a church that I believe aspires to live into this story. Because when I think about all of the stories of the Bible, this is one that is warm-hearted. It's deep thinking because it embraces and doesn't shy away from the doubt or the skepticism or the hurt or the anger or the past backstory. It's Bible-based because it feels like a parable has come to life. And it's inclusive because Thomas is never questioned, where have you been? Why weren't you here when we desperately needed you? Why are you just showing up today? But he's welcomed with open arms. And that's why when this story is about Jesus inviting Thomas to touch him, I think that there is something within each of us, and maybe even more keenly obvious at Grace, about what happens when Thomas's story reaches in and touches us as well. This is a story of hope and reconciliation and joy. And it's one that I think needs to sit with us as we think about what it means to be on that road home. Because we are all on that road somewhere. And Thomas's story is just another reminder of what happens when a sibling in Christ comes back and how they are treated matters. So let's keep that in mind in this season following Easter, as we welcome one another back, as we say hello to familiar or even forgotten faces, and as we continue to be the church that models what it is like to live by Christ's kind of reaction and responses, with grace, with love, with openness, reconciliation, and with a joy that says, we're glad you're home. Will you pray with me?